Hey, this is Ray Villalobos, and in this video, I wanted to show you how to work with responsive grids in Bootstrap. So Bootstrap is a framework that allows you to create websites very quickly. It has an awesome mobile-first responsive grid, and to get it, you can go to the website, which is getbootstrap.com. You'll need to go to this Getting Started section and copy some of this code here. You can download this to your hard drive if you want to. If you're working offline, you'll need to do this. If you're online, you can use these lines of code. Before I do that, let me show you what we'll be working with. So here's my basic index.html document. It's linking to a style sheet. Right now, that has a little bit of code, a little clear fix code to make sure that we clear floats, and also some code for creating an image grid. So if you look at the page, this is what it looks like, pretty plain. Some navigation here at the top and bottom. And let me show you the HTML. So we've got a body here with, has an ID of home because I like to put an ID on every page just so that I can target things with JavaScript. Then I have a section with a class of container. This is my big container that has everything. So down here, this is the closing version of that. Probably be a good idea to put in a comment there. And I have this footer navigation, pretty simple. I have this same kind of navigation here at the top as well in a header section with my name and my email address. And then I also have this sort of bunch of content here. Here's the image grid that I coded in the CSS. So pretty plain. To add Bootstrap, we need to go to the Bootstrap website, go to this Getting Started section once again, and I'm just going to copy the code from right here. So these 3 lines, let's copy those, and those need to go primarily in the head section. So I want to do it before any local style sheets because I want my local style sheets to override any code in the Bootstrap CSS. So I'm going to get rid of this comment here and indent these a little bit. So you're loading up a Bootstrap CSS and then a theme, and then here's some code for JavaScript. Now, before I do anything else, if you're working on a local browser to preview this, you need to make sure you add HTTP : right here. And what I want to do also is take the script tag and put it at the very bottom of the page. So I'm going to go down here at the right before the closing body tag and paste that script tag right there. Okay, I also need a copy of jQuery. And the best place to find the link is just to go right here into the Get Bootstrap website and then come down and get the link from right there. So back over here, right before my Bootstrap JavaScript, I want to paste that piece of code right there as well. Okay, awesome. So I'm going to save this and show you what Bootstrap is already doing for us. And you can see that the fonts are different. Also, notice that everything indented. And if I resize this at a certain point, you can see that the layout is changing a little bit. There are breakpoints, responsive breakpoints on this page that resize it so that they look great on any kind of device. Now, we can improve on that by working with the Bootstrap grid. And to do that, if you go to the Bootstrap website, click on CSS, and then click on Grid System. The Grid System is a 12-column grid, and it has a lot of cool functionality in it. The basic thing that you have to know is when you want to create a series of columns, what you do is you wrap your columns with a div class row like this, and then you create one column that is 8 units wide by using the COL and this MD-8, and then one that is 4 units wide by doing COL MD4. I'll explain these 2 letters in just a second. So I'm going to copy this code and come back here. And then I'm going to style, like, create a grid for this section, which is my main content. And I'll just paste this code right there. Obviously, I need to get rid of this. It's just sort of like sample text. So I'm going to make these, just put them on separate lines. And I'll grab these 3 lines of text and just paste them in my 8-column area. And then I'll grab this aside and put it in my 4-column area, right? And again, just indent. So I'm a nut about indenting things. It would probably be a good idea too to put some comments, because it gets really complicated when you work with Bootstrap if you don't comment things. So let me grab this and put a comment here as well. And this div is actually my row, right? So if I save this and I go back into my browser, you'll see that we now have a very nice 2-column layout. And this column layout is responsive. So when it gets to a certain size, it actually goes, it goes to a single column, like they go on top of each other. So the reason it has a breakpoint is what the 2 letters that we were looking at before are about. These 2 letters determine where those breakpoints happen. If you go back into the Bootstrap website and you scroll up to this section right here, you'll see this grid options. Notice that there's different letters that you can put in here, and the letters determine where those breakpoints happen. So right now we're using the medium grid, and that means that at 970 pixels wide, that grid will go into sort of a single column format like you saw. So I could modify that and change that to SM, right? And if I resize my window, you should see the breakpoint happen later. So here it's still 2 columns, and when it goes to this, it's now single column. So the breakpoint has happened earlier. We do have some margins, and how are those happening? Well, that has to do with that container that right now is on my entire page. So I have this section here with a class of container. I'm going to take this class out to show you what happens with the layout then. So now the layout is going as wide as the entire page. And that's okay, but that looks kind of weird. So whenever you want something to indent and center it and be aligned to that grid in the middle, then you have to add this class container. But sometimes you don't really want an element that's centered within your layout. So if you don't want that, I'm going to grab this section class container and I will move it underneath this header. And then I'll take the closing one, this container right here, and put it right over here on top of the footer. So if I go back into my layout, you can see that this middle part is now aligned in the centered, and these other things aren't. That may be useful. So let me show you how you can add a Jumbotron to your layout and control things a little bit better. If you go to the component section, you click right here on Jumbotron and it shows you what it looks like. So all you got to do to get this sort of style is to add a class Jumbotron to a section. So let's go into our index.html, and in this header part right here, I'm going to create a section with a class of Jumbotron. And I'm going to put just these 2 lines right here because the other thing's a navigation, right? And save that and let's see how that looks. So refresh. You can see that it's giving you that gray background, and it's not really having those round edges because I don't have this in the container. If I place that container, so if I moved this section class container and made it wrap the entire page like it did before, you would see, let's see, okay, go back here. You could see the rounded edges, and now it's kind of aligned and centered like the rest of the content. But sometimes you want, say, a header to kind of flow around, not flow inside that, but be as wide as the whole page. So to do that, like I said, we don't put it in the container class, right? So let's say that we wanted to add an image to that Jumbotron. So we're back to this right now. Notice that it's not aligned. This content is not aligned with the rest of my page, which might not be cool sometimes. So if we move this, notice that this kind of goes to the left, and maybe that's not what you want. You want the actual text in there to be aligned. So I'm going to come back here. So inside this Jumbotron, I want to make sure that this text is flowing inside that container that centers things. So I'm going to do another div with a class container and put my text in there, right? And now the text is aligned with the rest of the content, but my background goes the entire width of the page. which is sometimes sort of what you want to do. You just have to watch out where you place that container. It doesn't have to contain the whole page. It can just go on a section like this header, which is cool. So let me also go ahead and put a background image. So to do that, I'll do a class of, just a header, and then a class of Jumbotron, right? And I'll do a background URL, and then find an image. Okay, and I will center this. So background, position, center, center. And now I've got a nice image behind my text. So that's pretty cool. You can control which things fall within the container and align and which things don't. Like my navigation's not aligning right now. So that's awesome. And the column grid should be pretty easy to understand. If you wanted to, for some reason, instead of having these two different columns, have 3 columns, then what you would do is you would just create another div, right? And we've got, these all need to add up to 12. So I'm going to do this one as 4, this one as 4, and leave this one like that. So if I come back here, now I have 3 columns, each taking up the same amount of space. So just by messing around with those numbers, you can make any column that you want. Just by messing around with those numbers, you can make any sort of column layout that you need to. Let me just undo to bring this back to a 2-column system. So let's work on the navigation. You know, one of the things I don't like about Bootstrap is the navigation code is very complex. So if you go to this nav bar section, the default nav bar, the example that you get is just massive. This is for like the ultimate Kung Fu nav bar. You know, this has like a brand, it has like a search thing, all kinds of drop downs. It has like this little hot dog menu that appears whenever you make the windows too small. I'm not a really big fan of the hot dog, but some people love it. So I'm going to show you just how to make just a simple navigation from, you know, maybe some navigations, you know, that you're already using on your websites. So trying to do maybe not quite as minimal a navigation as I can, but at least something that's simpler than that example. So this has a lot of code, right? So I'm going to say first I'll create, this is my header. So I'm going to do a section with a class of container, right? So I think my navigation to kind of have that border or that margin. Okay, and then in the nav, I'm going to add a class of nav bar default. And you should put in here role equals navigation. And then we're going to add another div here with a class of container fluid, right? And we'll put our unordered list in there. And then I am also going to add something else, this thing called a brand, which I think looks kind of nice. We'll say div, a class of navbar header. I do like this one. And then we'll just put in a list item here with a class of navbar brand. And just really nothing. Maybe the name here. Some sort of name. You can put a logo in here if you wanted to. Or a name. And then my unordered list gets a class of nav and then navbar dash nav. Looks like I forgot the class here. So the class. Okay, so let me go ahead and go back to my page. You can see the navigation. It looks pretty cool. If you wanted to make one of these items be highlighted by default, you can also add a class to one of these. So you can say, hey, this list item, this first one, since we're on the home page, can get a class of active. And now that one will be pressed. You don't have to use this nav bar. I think it does look really nice. So if you wanted to make it even simpler, you can just get rid of these 2 lines, and then you just have a normal navigation. But I happen to like this nav bar header. But hopefully this shows you how to control and create columns if you want them, and when you can use a container to make sure that something centers and aligns within the grid, and when you put things outside of container if you want something to be the whole width, and then also how to convert simple navigation into Bootstrap style navigation.